Good afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Bruce Dutu. I'm Chair of Native American Studies, and it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to our program this afternoon, and especially to welcome back a very illustrious group of alumni, and I think you're all in for a treat. If yesterday's presentations before my class in Native American Studies was any indication, you're in for some good stories, a lot of it fictional. Drew made a comment during the chat yesterday. He said, you know, it would have been very interesting for students to hear from each of the speakers one by one and ask them the same question and see how consistent the stories end up being and stuff. So there's some fantasy that will be interspersed throughout, and they'll be checking each other, I'm sure, during the course of our program. This is our winter term installment of our 40th anniversary celebration of the founding of Native American Studies. We kicked off our events last fall with a wonderful panel on tribal sovereignty, principally organized by Dale Turner, and we're going to conclude next spring with a wonderful panel featuring a number of outstanding Native authors. And that panel is being organized principally by my colleagues Melanie Benson-Taylor and Vera Palmer, and it's going to be a treat. I think we're on for April the 5th, Friday. So you'll be hearing more information about that. A tremendous group of folks coming. But this is winter term, and our panel for today is a look at origin stories, the founding of Native American Studies. And we thought, what better way to talk about the founding of Native American Studies than to go back and bring back some of the individuals who played a key role as students to help spur the college into taking some action to create an academic program in Native American Studies. Our panel is entitled Origin Stories, Native Alumni Reflections on the Founding of Dartmouth's Native American Studies program. Our four panelists are the following, and I'll introduce them all at once, and then I will toss out a couple of questions, and they are free to ignore the questions, sort of like a Senate hearing where you answer the question you want to answer. A couple of questions, and that will be hopefully enough of a prompt to get them going. Not that any of these guys need any kind of prompt to get them going. But hopefully they'll have a chance to offer a few opening remarks. And then we'd like to get you involved and ask them some questions that you may have about their experiences and particular episodes that may be in your memories or your sort of curiosity about those days, and get a bit of a dialogue going. We're on here for about 4:30 till 5:45. If we run into 6 o'clock, that's okay if you can stick around, but that's our time frame for the program. Let me introduce our panelists. Howard Badhan, Lakota from Rosebud, class of 73. Howard is this young man right there, a traditional singer, a composer of Sundance songs, a ritualist, a healer, an intercessor at many different sun dances since 1977. Howard is a founder and co-owner of High Star Productions, Inc., which produces CDs and videos of Native American song and dance performances, and he's the author of Native American Healing, a Lakota Ritual. Drew Ryce, Mohawk, class of 74. From the streets of Chicago, sleeping on his social worker's back porch, Drew entered Dartmouth with the class of 74 and ultimately graduated from Oberlin College and got his JD at Yale Law School, and later became a very prominent figure in the world of entertainment finance and litigation. His law school classmate, or one of his law school classmates, now Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor, wrote of Drew in her new autobiography. He's a brilliant man, sort of like an IBM mainframe. This is from the Justice. She also said in the same passage that Drew hired her as a bouncer at a local bar as well as a bartender. So maybe he can shed some more light about the young Sotomayor. Drew is currently general counsel for the Colville Tribal Federal Corporation in Washington State, a tribe that is actually headed by another Dartmouth graduate, John Cyrus, class of 1991. So you see, we're everywhere. Michael Hanitchak, a familiar face to probably all of you in the audience. Michael is of Choctaw Nation, class of 73. Michael has served in a variety of roles here at the college, assistant director of admissions back in the 70s, where folks like yours truly came through and sat with Michael for quite a while. I'm sure he had quite a bit to do with saying, let's take a shot on this Bayou boy, see what he does. Later, he came back as director of the Native American program, where he set a record for endurance and all other kinds of things. Patience, I think 12 years in that role, 13. And supported innumerable students over those years, and continues to play the role as local community resident, elder, patient steward of so many things here at the college. Michael was an instructor years ago in both film studies and Native American studies, where he taught a course on Native peoples in film. And he was a founding member of the National Institute for Native Leadership in Higher Education, otherwise known as NINLE. Finally, Dave Bonga, Chippewa from White Earth, Minnesota, class of 74. Dave was also a director of the Native American program, so you have 3 former directors of the NAP right here. Dave was director during the years 1975 to 1979. And I want to take just a personal moment to say a public thanks to Dave, because it was during those years that I was a student here. And Dave was enormously helpful and supportive in helping to keep folks like me on campus. I don't know that I would have graduated from Dartmouth had it not been for Dave. So Dave, thank you. Dave is a law graduate of Gonzaga Law School, 1982, and has worked with the Kalispel tribe in a variety of capacities since the mid-'80s, in various roles that have included in-house legal counsel, magistrate, program administrator, tribal planner, president of the Camas Institute, which is a Kalispel entity that promotes enrichment of each individual through educational and career opportunities, utilizing a holistic approach. He also currently works as the tribe's senior tribal attorney. He sits as an associate, as a justice to the Confederated Tribes of Colville Court of Appeals, and has served as a judge for a number of tribes in the Northwest. He's also been an adjunct faculty member at Gonzaga Law School, where he's been involved in their Indian law program and has taught their law course in federal Indian law, and has also been involved with their undergraduate Native American program. So these folks have gone on to do lots of great stuff. But today, they're going to take us back to the early 70s, when we were at a very pivotal moment in the college's history in terms of a number of changes, coeducation of Dartmouth, and the introduction of large numbers of African American and Native American studies. And so for our community, the 70s represented a recommitment of a charter purpose, long overdue. And I think some of the questions for folks then and for folks now were, did we really know what we were getting ourselves into? Well, I'm glad that folks took the leap. And here are the 2 questions that I would ask our panelists to, again, ignore or use as a stepping off point. The 2 questions are as follows. Why was it important for the college to establish an academic program in Native Studies at that time? And or number 2, what did you envision, or what do you envision an NAS program could or should provide to the academic community and to Indian country? So more of a contemporary perspective. So historical, contemporary, a mix of the 2. We'll start with whoever would like to go first. David, you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Thank you.
Okay. What I really, back in those days, it was not really, that was not our major concern, I guess, was to start a Native American Studies program. During that first year back in 1970, when they had recruited 15 of us from across the country, Drew and I and 13 other people from all over, from New York State, from Long Island to Oklahoma to Arizona, New Mexico, Washington, Oregon. They brought us here and they just kind of dropped us off, kind of says, well, here you go. And so I think one of the first things that Drew and I noticed was that there's all guys here. And nobody really told us about what that meant, about, an all-male school. And so that was kind of, our introduction to Dartmouth. Wasn't really pleasant, but that was the way it was. And then, we got to become pretty good friends with each other. I mean, there was probably, out of the 15, I would say 13, maybe 12 of us were pretty tight, I guess. We lived in Chase Hall, third floor Chase Hall, and it was I guess a survival attitude that we had. I'm not sure how much academics played in everything, and I think it was just survival, just trying to be here. And when we got here, we're all excited about being in an Ivy League school and going to a football game on a Saturday. I remember going to our first football game. We were all sitting together, and out comes this I guess this cheerleader, and he was dressed up as an Indian guy, and he wasn't Indian, and he's down there leading cheers, and they were going wahoo wah. And I remember we're sitting there, and you hear all these wahoo wah chants, and then you hear the drums started beating, and I can remember just kind of looking at everybody else on that we were sitting with, and we were just kind of, it was just kind of, what's going on? Wow. And it was just real, not irritating, it was just real, I think, it just didn't make you feel very comfortable. And so I remember getting up and walking out, and I never did go back to a football game. And I had a reputation of graduating from Dartmouth without ever being here, because I participated in a lot of off-campus programs and stuff. And I made sure that I was never here during the fall time. Because the fall time for the football season and the Dartmouth Indian symbol, the mascot, would come back, and it was just not a very conducive area for study. So that was one thing we encountered right away. We just had a whole number of issues. The director at the program at that time was not the best choice that the college had made. He was an Indian guy from the Southwest and stuff, but the only time he'd ever come and meet with the students and talk with us when he's drunk. And it just, really...
Not a pleasant drunk.
Not a pleasant, yeah.
Yeah.
You want...
Go ahead. No.
And,
Just wanted to make sure we get this across. This isn't Aunt Tilly at the stove with a little buzz on, chatting to people. This guy was mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And at that time, we had one female student. She was a special student, Denise
Dean.
Dean. It's Denise White.
Denise White,
Denise Dean, who had transferred from Oberlin and had come to be here for that first year with us. And the director at the time really made a lot of inappropriate comments to her and threats and things, and it just really turned, I think, the majority of the story, against him big time.
Okay, I will break in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he actually stuck a pork chop down the front of his pants, unzipped himself, reached in and said, "I got something for you, Denise," and pulled it out. Okay, this is the level that you were getting. That was the sole and only support we were getting. And it marked a good faith effort on the part of the college, what to do. You see, because these guys had been there, but the crowd was coming in, the following year. What do? We need, let's get an adult Native guy in here, and they found an adult Native guy. But unfortunately, he was completely, totally blown away by the experience. We at least were young and flexible, he was not. So he was just completely lost, alone. He was more depressed than any of us, and he was absolutely inappropriate at every possible time. He was just awful. Okay, it just didn't work at all. Sorry about that. So, I'm just going to. Should I just keep going?
Go ahead.
Okay. Here's the thing. there's what's here and then there's what's not here. Okay, so we arrive, and Dave says survival mode, and that's absolutely true because I don't think any of us knew what we were doing. I mean, a couple of us had been to prep school. Howard, for example, Bruce had been to prep school, but the rest of us, I don't think, had a clue about what to do in a college. What does a paper look like? Okay, you know what? I was shocked to find out that your first day of class, you were expected to have read, up to chapters so-and-so. I had no clue. I thought you went to class and then they started, you spent a couple of classes talking about books. So as all, children do, and as young as we were, we were still children. You try to find out about yourself. So we looked through the syllabus and we found classes that might have something to do with us. And the only department really was anthropology. So we all signed up for the anthropology classes. And really, that had nothing to do with us and never would. But just to give you an idea of what you're stepping into then, okay, one of the professors in the big survey course, every year, maybe every semester, he would do the following. He would, in one of his classes, he would dress up in, I think it was Hopi regalia, okay, and he'd sit there and he would be a Hopi, and the students would ask him questions, and then he would answer as a Hopi, and this then would demonstrate how difficult it was to do intercultural exchanges, okay? And man, I gotta tell you, it was like a complete disaster. I mean, as far as we were concerned, this just did not, I mean, he wasn't operating off of the native people that we've been talking to our whole lives on a daily basis. Didn't sound like them at all. And the answers were just kind of odd. And one exchange I actually remember, he actually dropped his persona, became a professor again and became irate and started talking about how we needed to learn the academic levels of this and began talking about, I think it was the Omaha kinship system. And so, okay, under the Omaha kinship system, which I think like 3 or 4 of us were actually part of, what would you call your father's brother's sister's brother's female cousin? Okay, and I think it was Travis said Doris, and it just kind of went that far, it just, and that was the level. So I mean, so the only representations you're seeing are, and I think it was actually he was being a drunk Indian at the halftime, or that might have been a different, game. I mean, it wasn't just being an Indian. It was the big bottle and the staggering around. In fact, I think they stole Tom Teagarden's paraphernalia at one point because it was actually, we were like, what the hell? Because it was actually realistic paraphernalia. The guy was actually wearing a powwow costume. And so that's what you're seeing. You got, Wahoo Wah men at Dartmouth. The third line of the alma mater thing, something about Lone Pine is blah, blah, blah. My name translated from Mohawk is Lone Pine. Wait, what the hell is this? I mean, you're getting these weird fractured mirrors, reflecting things back. And so that's the need. And I don't want to, monopolize it, but the only other point I'd make is that we were young and we were children, even the ones that had been to Vietnam, we were still children, okay? But we weren't typical kind of subsequent Dartmouth classes, even the native ones. We weren't, nice kids who had, had like a toasted cheese sandwich waiting for them at lunch and, and did their homework and had 2 parents that went to college and that kind of a stuff. We'd been on the street, been in rodeos, been in jobs, we're construction workers. You were construction, didn't you? I mean, everybody was just doing, what they did. A couple had been to Nam. People had been around quite a bit. We participated in the 60s, big time, marched with Martin Luther King, before I ever got here, this kind of stuff. So we already had an activist mindset and not a, and it didn't take that much to push us in a direction. So I think we set the table. That's where we were, and something has to be done. What do we do?
And so, so that was what, that was kind of the academic component. What we thought, what we needed was probably some type of Native American Studies program. But again, that was kind of secondary. We needed also they gave us in College Hall, where Collis Center or whatever that place is now. In College Hall, there used to be a great big empty space in the back with a great big fireplace. And so they had these single lights hanging down from the ceiling, and they said that we could have that as our gathering spot. And so they put some class, some alum class gave us a TV that we put in there and hooked up the TV to cable. And Bob Abrams was one of the, unfortunately, that's all he did was watch TV.
Until they kicked him out.
Yeah. And nobody, nobody ever really paid much attention to that. But there was Bob all the time, just, watching TV. And so we figured, it would be nice to have some place we could call our own to escape, just to kind of be alone and talk and study and whatnot. And then we also, found that we all came from a relatively not very wealthy families. And so we never had any money, and so financial aid was a problem. There was an issue with, like who were they going to let in and things. And so it was just all these problems were kind of piling up during that first year. And finally in the springtime, we kind of were meeting together and decided that we would go and advise the president of what they should do. And so we went and had our own little sit-in at President Kemeny's office and sat there until about an hour and a half or so. And then he finally made time for us, and we all went in to sit down and talk with him. And we told him, if you're really serious if Dartmouth is really serious about educating Native people, this is what you're going to have to do. First, you're going to have to get rid of the Indian symbol, get rid of the director of the program, give us a place we can call our own, give us a Native American Studies program, not for us, but for everybody else on campus, because nobody else had any idea of what it meant to be Indian or Native in that time period. Everybody thought we all lived in teepees and rode horses and stuff. And it was just, and so, we said Native American Studies had to be started, not for us, but to educate everybody else. And then finally how to fix financial aid and admissions. And then that's where we kind of left things with President Kemeny, and he just kind of, took it under advisement and said that, he would see what he could do. And then, fortunately for us, over the next year or so, he did start the process to make those changes.
You guys got to just break right here
Yeah.
at some point.
You guys are older.
Well, speechless.
No, you're
I haven't
not.
heard you talk like that in a long time.
He's been rehearsing. I guess the only request I would have before we go any further is that, Karen, you don't get to ask questions. Is that-
No, I already talked about
Oh, you did? Okay. But I think that remembering being, because if you didn't figure it out, Howard and I got here before they did. And we were here, there were three of us in our class for,
Wayne,
Myself. Bill, yeah,
well, but
Oh,
they
Wayne
were,
before that.
Dwayne and Bill were earlier
This is what I
classes.
Yeah,
meant,
they had come and then
it
we
gets
left
a little
and then
fuzzy
came
as
back
the
and-
decades roll on.
Right.
Okay. So,
Yeah, exactly. They were earlier classes, but there were three of us in our class, Travis, you and me, and anyway. And remembering some of the discussions that took place over that year and the subsequent year when the rest of the folks got here, when the program actually began. I think that one of your comments about we were looking for something in one of these classes that has something to do with us is one impetus for the Native American Studies, and and then one of the other comments was that it was also for everybody else. But I think those two things were combined. It was a desire to have, and one of the hard things was, I think we were inventing the wheel. We couldn't articulate then exactly the kinds of things that we're saying now, because none of this stuff had ever been done before, at least in any kind of a school like Dartmouth. There were other programs out there, but we certainly weren't the experts on them, but we were the experts on where we came from And I think that was one of the big driving forces, was kind of that light bulb going on that nothing around here actually relates to us, even though the topic sort of on the surface seems like it should, but nothing relates to the real us. And nobody else knows that. And that was kind of an odd situation to be in. And I remember one of the things, for instance, that I remember distinctly, I spent a lot of my second year working. Since I'd already been here for a year, I had some things under my belt already, and trying to keep some of these other guys, trying to keep them here. And one of the kind of defining moments for me was working with one of the Southwest students for whom English was a second language, and trying to help him through English composition was a real challenge. And we finally learned that there was a course, there was an English composition course available for foreign students for whom English was a second language. So we said, oh, that's perfect. Why don't we get these guys in to that class, because that's English is a second language for them. And the English department said, no, they're U.S. citizens. English can't be a foreign language. It can't be a second language. And we said, but it is a second language. Said, no, it can't be a second language. So they're not, they're U.S. citizens, they can't be in the class. That didn't make any sense to us, of course, and I eventually wound up actually going to see President Kemeny about it, and he really was extremely reluctant to intervene in a department's decisions. But that was one of the things that really just made so little sense to me, that people could be so rigid in both their view of what they thought some of us were, and their ignorance of the realities of the situation, that to say that they were U.S. citizens and therefore English could not be a second language, so they could not be in that class, just was, that's when the light kind of goes on, you say, these people really need to learn something. And that's a very strange position to be in as a student. When you're looking at the rest of the institution, saying and seeing and not being able to quite get your head around the fact that they don't know what they're doing and they don't know what they're talking about. Not that they were malintentioned. It was a good faith effort, as you said before. It was a very good faith effort. They really were serious about wanting to do something meaningful. And fortunately, I think enough folks were really serious about wanting to do something right, and they actually listened. And I've said it a number of times, Dartmouth has never done everything that we thought they ought to do. They've never done it as fast as we thought they ought to do it. But the commitment, the fundamental underlying commitment to living up to that founding principle of educating Indian youth, they stuck by it. And that made all the difference in the world. The fact that Dartmouth actually stuck with what they started out, even though when they started out it looked like a total disaster, because they quite literally didn't know what they were doing, and it was a grand experiment. But stuck with it. And luckily, as I was saying, a lot of the then guys that were here had been around. They were of an activist mindset. When they saw something that didn't make sense, they were going to say something about it. And fortunately, there were folks who would actually listen.
And one of the objections that I remember was, no, we can't start up a Native American studies, because then we'd have to start up, like a studies for like all the groups. you know, and I recall our response was, dude, you got an English department. You know, you already have one for the other big groups. You know, you got a French department. You got, and it's seeped into everything, you know, that you do. It's there were many classes on European influence of this, and then even contemporary American history and sociology classes were concentrating on sort of the big picture, and the big picture wasn't us, okay? And then, and just as an aside, I mean, I might say, a secondary push was the model for being a enlightened Anglo at that time was not segregation, was integration. So we're bringing you in. So I think the model was how to integrate Native kids into Dartmouth, okay? So that we're a part of Dartmouth, sort of scattered around and a part of Dartmouth, and then moving on as part of the Dartmouth community as they knew it at the time. But the civil rights movement as related to natives during that era was not. It has always been sovereignty. And sovereignty isn't we get scattered off the reservations and put into the cities and become diluted off and become just like everybody else, but to maintain our identity in our particular homelands and with our languages and our culture. So it's we were actually pushing against a double and triple, model. Okay, so you would have, and there were, and I'm going to say this, we did not hit, at least not in my experience, that wall of, screw you racism, that was all around America and other places. Didn't hit that at all. It was very well intentioned, but the intention was be more like us. Stop being like you, be more like us, blend in over here. We're welcoming you in. But of course, if you get welcomed in, then you're lost. Then you're sort of lost and you're gone. And if that had triumphed, if that model had triumphed, then Dartmouth would probably have gone on year after year, accepting 7, 8, or 9 Indian kids having nothing much going on here, and them going off to be dentists on Long Island or something, but not, and really, we wouldn't be here, talking like this today, because there'd be nothing to talk about. I can't believe he hasn't brought in yet. What the? Are you okay? You didn't die on us here or something?
I have to use this because I have such a soft voice. You have to all move close.
Cut him off when he got after about a half hour here.
Okay, I didn't do it. Or I can say honest, I lied. My experience with Dartmouth, my first experience was back in 1965. I was here in the summer of '65 as an ABC student with the ABC program. I forget the name of the dorms that were over in that direction, I recall. And we spent there's about 20 of us, blacks, Latinos, Native Americans. We were brought in to go to school here for the summer to make a transition from our environments into private schools. The 20 of us who were here at that time were from inner city, some from the south, black kids from the south. There were 4 natives at the time. Myself, a Crow from Montana.
Bill?
No.
No.
Gordon Reelbird was this guy's name. And then from my tribe, there's a fellow named Cleve Burnett. And then I believe it was someone from up in Mohawk country, I think it was. And we took classes to learn how to study so we can make the transition from our locales into the Northeast prep school system. And I ended up after that summer at a school called Lennox School for Boys in Lennox, Massachusetts. And I was there for 4 years. Now, in that space I was here during the summer, I was taken to all the places here on campus that had, quotes, Indian things. They were going to impress me. And Hovey Grill, the frescoes at Baker Library, other places, Hood Museum, where there was native things. And the 4 of us were shown these things, I thought there was good intention, but, I thought what they're trying to do is convince me that this is an okay place for natives. At the same time, they're saying this used to be a school for Native Americans. And after I went to all these different places and saw this paraphernalia, material, art, things like that, I literally had a goal in my mind that was not specific, but at the same time, I thought to myself, this has to change. This really has to change. So I'm going to come back in 4 years, and I'm going to change this place. And my intention was to Indianize Dartmouth. I succeeded. To the extent one person can. But my experience is that when I got here was that I came and Travis Kinsley was a Hopi Yaqui from Arizona, and he was part of the ABC program at Hartford, I believe, down the road. And he graduated from that high school and he applied to Dartmouth and got in. I applied to 2 institutions and got in here. But I applied early decision here, didn't tell him that I applied to the other place too. And got in and matriculated in the fall of '69. And that idea I had back then, 4 years later, a year earlier rather, was this place has to change. And so I will admit to having fathered a lot of the efforts that brought this place to where it is now. I'm not the only one who did it, but at the same time, I can say that when I did it, there were very few people who supported. But at the same time, the things that really made it possible for me to make some headway were relationships. Relationships with faculty, relationships, I really got to be close friends with John Kemeny. And what Dave talks about when they went in to talk to him, I had spent some time with him before that event, actually, because one of the things that happened is that first year I was here, I started to take classes that I thought would get me through this place quickly. And as I got into going to classes, I started to get involved in the push to have this institution recommit itself to educating Native Americans. And the thought I had then was that we needed a support system for Native students. And I learned that from my experience in prep school. I was recruited to prep school by, many of you know the author. His name was Vine Delory Jr. He came to the reservation where I was in Rosebud, South Dakota, and he talked to about 10 of us and convinced us that we should go apply through his organization, which was called American Indian Scholarship Program in Denver. And they were associated with the Interscholastic Talent Search, Independent Schools Talent Search. And this fellow went through the reservations up north and convinced a lot of us to come to school back east here. And his goal was to get a Native student into every prep school here in the Northeast. And I thought that was really an unwise choice, which I told him about 4 years ago before he passed away. I said, you changed my life and I haven't forgiven you for it. And he said, well, you got a damn good education, so don't worry. He said, you guys will take over when we go. Well, they all left, so I'm not surprised that we're all here sitting in front of you, talking to you about what was begun back then. So we started at this learning school. A friend of mine, a Dene friend, who I went to school with there, his name is Michael Benson. We started an organization called the Organization of Native American Students. And we got in touch with every Native student who was here in a prep school in the Northeast. And we started to get funding to get together And one of the places we got together here was here on campus, I believe in my senior in prep school. And I reaffirmed at that point that I was going to come back here and partake of this institution. So when I came, I really did full-heartedly get into the idea that this place had to change. And I met people like Jared Daniel. I haven't seen him in a long time, but we were on committees together, like the Committee on Equal Opportunity, something called the Dartmouth Plan. We also put on committees like the Committee on Conduct and Standing. That's the committee that kicked me out of here, by the way. But, and then we had, they did know me too. But relationships here at the faculty level and at the administration level led to some agreements by this institution to start pushing, to start turning around that whole idea, to recommit itself to educating the indigenous youth. And in the summer before John Kemeny became president, he asked me to come up to his office. And no one can verify this except John and I. And so you can take it as truth or not as truth. It's been my experience. He sent me a note, and so I went to his office, and he was in the president's office. And he said, come in, Howard. I want you to sit here. And I sat down in his chair. And he went around the table and sat down in where I would sit. And he said, you're the institutional president now. He said, the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to be this institution's next president. Right now, you're the president. You tell me what this institution is going to do about this Native American issue. So I gave him all my ideas, but I was saying as though I were the president, well, we're going to do this. We're going to go out and recruit Native American students. And once we get them here, we're going to set up a support program for them. And a year or two after that, we're going to set up a Native American Studies program that you can major in. Any student here on campus can major in this program. And I said, and it has to start immediately. So he said, fine. He came back around to sit in his chair. I went in front, sat in front, in the chair I would sit in. And he said, Howard, he said, I promise you, this institution will change. He said, I can't tell you what dates, I can't tell you what, but he said, right now, we can start mobilizing support to go do this. He got me in touch with the recruiting program, and I had access to the carpool here at Dartmouth. That was great. And plane tickets to go anywhere in the country I could to try to convince Indian students to come to Dartmouth. And so the first 15, there's a good number of them that I recruited, including Denise. And it had to happen that way because without that support, we couldn't have done it. But there were many other faculty people who had interest in reconnecting something to this institution's history back to its former commitment. And for me, the Native American Studies program started, literally, in the winter of 1970. I think it was the second quarter here or whatever. Mr. Wright said he's going to tell that story, but I taught a course through Dartmouth Free University on Native Americans, and he was one of the students. And we had a really good time talking about Indians. I don't know what I taught, but I showed a lot of films because I had access. And for me, that started that, and I traveled a lot, and I really got involved, and I got to be on committees that start to look at the Dartmouth Plan, about the co-education here at the institution. That committee I was on, I had to be on because I wanted to get a girlfriend here on campus. they weren't allowed, you know. So, but the idea that many ideas developed that I took part in, and I was telling some students last night that you can have a vision, you can have a goal you want to get to. The moment you share it, others take it and they bring it to life. No person can realize a vision for self except if it involves other people. In my experience at Dartmouth, I got separated eventually because I was so busy trying to get this thing off the ground and forgot to be a student. And I did enjoy every class I took. It's just I didn't go to very many. And but my view of this program as it is right now, I don't have like excitement or a goal for this institution other than I'm satisfied that it made the effort. And it is still making the effort and it's alive. When I heard that there are over 180 students on campus, that was unimaginable that year I was here pushing. Now it is. And so my view that I share with you right now is that efforts were made by many that were realized. And for me, this is a time of satisfaction. This is me like getting a diploma from Dartmouth College, because what we started is life. And other Native students get their opportunities here. But I don't believe that this institution is here to make Indians Indians. I also believe that the institution is here to educate, and that should include Indians. And I think, you're well on your way. So part of my reluctance to say anything was I didn't want to say anything that showed any conflict. But our indigenization of this institution has begun and will continue. And I believe that Indians and the rest of the world will start to see each other. And then this world has a chance for peace. I left Dartmouth, went to Harvard, and then went back out to my country and went back to my people. I turned to our traditional ways to make certain that those things stay alive, not to preserve, but to practice. And that's what I do now. I run sundances, I do ritual things amongst my people, healings, and because I am a Lakota, and I never stopped being a Lakota. Whatever experience I had to share, I shared it here, and still sharing it with the world. And I don't work for anyone except the Spirit, and I'm happy about that. Because the only person I have to argue with now is myself, if I think I'm doing something not so good. So I will say that this program really is on its way, and that's my sense here, is there is a bit of satisfaction going on. Because I think every Native student I met, they know why they're here. And if they don't, you'll find out very soon. And the door ahead for you is open. And those of us who are at the beginning, I can only say, keep going. There are others who went before you, but a lot of them returned to their ways, like I did. And that's because I am who I am. And that's what I encourage you, is be who you are. No matter what race you are. Be who you are. But be willing to share this planet. Instead of trying to destroy it. Because if we succeed in that, the Earth Mother's going to spank us pretty good. And my hope is we learn something to further life as a part of our education. And there's nothing really more I can say than that. But I can make up any story you want me to, including the truthful ones. So
Why don't we get
yeah.
interactive here?
Yes.
Ask the question. What do you want to hear about? What do you guys want to hear? Somebody. I'll start calling names.
Early 1970 trustees meeting, I'm sure it was Dwayne Howard this, Howard?
Yes.
I was curious what your memory of it was in terms of whether the extortion that we applied to the trustees that weekend, if the decision that weekend was true, or whether that was just. Can't remember that.
My memory is that it was a really good step forward because the symbol was taken off first by the coaches at that point. And then, but Dwayne and some others went down there to actually do it. I didn't want to go down because it was cold that day. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in this humid cold. And that's not the truth. They went down and they were carrying the signs around and pushing people around. And I was sitting, I think, in the athletic building with the big windows, and I was sitting there watching them, cheering them on.
Nobody remembers which of us were actually out there pushing people around. It's funny. That's just all fallen away. But we were there. Yeah.
You were. Yeah.
Somebody was there.
Somebody was there. Yeah. You know, nobody here. You know, but somebody was definitely there. Anybody else? Back there.
But John, what do you remember yourself?
I remember the trustees being told that they didn't get rid of the Indian symbol
Yeah.
and a few other things, including Native American studies,
Yeah,
that we weren't coming back in the fall.
yeah,
And they needed to make a decision that weekend. Or the student movement on campus was just shut down. And this was a broad-scale student movement, as well as faculty. That if they didn't make a commitment that weekend, then there was going to be no fall time.
yeah.
And I remember hearing, I didn't go to the meetings, the trustee meetings, but I remember that being pretty much what happened. But I don't know, like, prove it, right?
Well, to me, all those added up because there are other incidents like that all along the way, you know. And yesterday we were remarking that you can't point to really one person and say it happened because of this one person. My experience is that all the relationships we developed to support each other really pushed this institution to those changes.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Just to point to a larger movement that everybody's familiar with. It doesn't start with Brown v. Board. It doesn't start with Selma. It doesn't start with, you know, marching in Chicago. It doesn't start with Bridgeport. It doesn't start with Martin Luther King. It never started anywhere. It just keeps going. It gets bigger and ebbs and flows and finally results in things. And that's actually the truth. You know. Did you want to say something?
Two questions. One is specifically about you guys. At the end of your fourth year, by the time you graduated, did you still feel that your best friends and your sort of group were just the native students, or did you connect with any of the non-native students, which seems to be happening now, 40 years later? I think most, at least the Native American students I know, that they do reach out outside now.
Want to go right to
Or
left?
was it still kind of a strange
You want to go right
place
to left this time?
Then I have another quick question.
Yeah, I would say that, yes, I did have, because there were only, when I got here, there were only 3 of us in my class and 2 upperclassmen. And I didn't even meet, I don't think we met until the following fall.
Yeah.
And Travis, I met in the spring because we happened to be in the same anthropology class, as you were talking about anthropology, wanting to take the kind of a course. And so I, in one sense, I was forced to make friends, but I hadn't grown up on a reservation anyway. So that was not something that was new to me. So I was one of those people who were kind of back and forth between the communities. And that sort of became my role the next year, was a lot of the times I was going back and forth between the communities, and because I could, and because I had already been here for a year and I already had connections in terms of the non-native community. So yeah, I did have, and there's still the people I keep in touch with now. It's mixed, although I would say that the majority of those who I am in contact most often are the native students.
As I understand your question, you were asking if we made friends in a larger community. Well, I married an Anglo woman. You can't get much closer to another person than that.
Was Michael Doris, by the time you graduated, was Michael Doris already here?
Correct.
Care to say a little bit about Michael? And then,
I would have to say that the only person communicating with Michael Doris to try to get him here was me at the beginning. We used the ABC program with Charles Mancula, Dean Dye. I was introduced to Michael through Paul Raymeyer, who was at the St. Paul's Church, I believe, here on campus.
And then Tucker Foundation,
Yeah. Dean Dye was at the Tucker Foundation at that time. Yeah. And so we used our offices like the Native American program. And since I was told about Michael teaching at Hampshire College in the summers, I started writing to him saying, we're thinking of starting a Native American program. Would you be interested in coming here, first of all, to teach in the summer program, because that was a way we could kind of sneak him in. And Gregory Prince and others really opened up their department to try to create a place for him to come and teach in the summers. And so for the first year or so, all the correspondence to try to get him here was done through myself. And I think we convinced him when we told him there's going to be some Native American women on campus.
There was a hiring committee, and it's one of the few things I actually remember after all these years was being on that hiring committee and going over the candidates. And our consensus was we really wanted, I think it was Alphonse Ortiz,
Right.
To come, but he had a commitment, I think, to Princeton, but maybe next year, that kind of a thing. And I mean, it sounds, funny to say, you probably should never talk about what goes on in an interview committee or in a hiring committee, but that's actually what came up. So Mike was working on his PhD, and it was sort of, well, okay, we'll have Mike in here, and then we'll bring in, one of the heavyweights. And, but he was a big success. I mean, I would have majored in Mike Doris if it was possible to have majored in Mike Doris. He was a big success while he was here. He was a terrific guy. So, and very active and did all kinds of good stuff, while he was here. So it actually worked out maybe for the better, actually maybe for the better, which is the thing you can never tell. I don't want to be calling on people. I don't know. You, go ahead. Speak up.
I have a story to tell. Michael Doris gave me my ham loaf recipe, which I cooked. We also invited we had an apartment in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. We invited from the high school a student to come here. She hated Hanover. It was cold. It was March. We took her to a hockey game, and she said, I don't want to go to that school. So about several weeks after that, her father and her grandfather came to our living room and sat in our chairs with their arms folded and said, we want Gretchen to come here and do what you do. So we proceeded with it. She came, married the captain of the hockey team, and her daughter is here now, and I don't know whether Chrissy is in the audience or not, but she is a student at Dartmouth. So it's continued, and we're happy to have had some part in that in the beginning, almost 40 years ago, I think. Is that about right?
Yes.
About 40 years?
Yeah.
I'm reading something, I'll try to speak out. I'm reading something that sort of jarred two memories that I had. One not so recent and one fairly recently. The document that I'm reading is the catalog from Crossing Cultures for an exhibit that's in the hood now at Virginie's Art. And reading some of the articles, they're discussing the history of art, and they're also discussing the history of the Aborigines people in Australia. So that's sort of the context. But I was, as reading some of it, and reading about the conditions of the Native people of that country, and thinking, this is still horrendous. This is absolutely horrendous. But then I recall two experiences I had. One was probably 8 years ago. And I was in New York, and you may be able to tell me where I was. I was in upstate New York. And I was either on or passing an Indian reservation.
Akwesasne.
And just feeling devastated
Oh, and Sakwasasni, yeah.
These are the natives of my country, and this is where they're living. And then more recently, I was in Arizona, outside of Phoenix, and either going through or passing another Native American reservation.
Salt River.
You must have been with me.
Yeah, but by Phoenix, and it made you very depressed. It was Salt River. Yeah.
And then feeling the same sense of devastation. When you sit here talking to us at Dartmouth and thinking about holistically where you were then in the 70s and where Native people are now in this country, now, what, and I hate to, this is a big philosophical question on you, how does that make you feel? Because I can see it now as I'm telling you about it. I can see that reservation. I can see how they're living. And it left me despaired, it keeps me despaired. It was only the reading of Crossing Cultures that sort of brought it back.
Who wants to take that? God, what do you do?
That is a big one, but,
Yeah.
and I think that it's one of the things that we struggle with constantly. If one is aware, as soon as you become aware of that kind of a situation, that kind of a dichotomy within in a country or in a society, you can't help but struggle with it. I know for years and years, and I don't know, maybe it's an argument that is still going on here today. We argued, is it in Native people's best interest to bring their brightest here? Is that something we really shouldn't be doing? Or do we run the risk of creating a brain drain, basically, from places that desperately need people to do things? And the conclusion we've always come to is, yes, it is the right thing to do, but we have to make sure that we instill the idea that they're not coming here to get away. So I think that one of the things that one of the conclusions I came to in years and years and years being in the Native American Program Office was that we hear all the time, everybody's got to go out and get an education. You got to leave. You got to leave here and you got to go there and get an education. But everybody can't leave because then there's no place to go back to. So that's kind of the dilemma. How do you, like Howard was able to go out and go back? That's not always possible. And in many years, we wrestled with the dilemma of we're essentially creating a program for forced assimilation because of the financial arrangements that the Native students have to take out a lot of loans. There's no way they can go home and repay those loans. No way. So we're forcing them by providing them this opportunity to go out somewhere else. And that became a real dilemma for us. Is this the right thing to do? Should we bring people here and knowing that they're going to be separated from their community for years because of what they're doing here? We always came down on the side of, yeah, we got to start somewhere, and we've got to change things somehow. But it is a long process, and as far as we have come, it's kind of like the more you learn, the more you find out you don't know, and the farther we have come, the more we see that it needs to be done. And can be done, because now we know it's possible to create things that didn't exist before that can change people's lives for the better. So, yeah, it is a dilemma, a constant dilemma of seeing that disparity between what could be and what is.
Any exercise of memory is essentially an exercise of the imagination. It's all going on in there. You're kind of reconstructing, okay? But going back to our time, okay, here, this is what was out there in the Native world, okay? And I actually don't have the exact stats, and actually probably somebody here does. But I think there were maybe 7 or 8 Native lawyers in the country, maybe in 1970, if that, and we never met any of them, There was, I think, 2 doctors or something, maybe 3, something like that. We never, any of us, I mean, well, I'm just going to say, it was a complete shock to me the first time I ever met a college graduate that was recognizably Native. I remember soon after graduating law school, I was talking to a traditional Mohawk woman, an older woman, and almost as old as I am now. And she began crying, actually, that and this is her quote, she says, one of our boys is a lawyer. She was all, wow, this is like a big deal. So you have to have some kind of a critical mass, and it wasn't, of these people who can play off each other and actually have circumstances where they can make an impact and do things. And certainly did not exist then, okay? And this whole Dartmouth admissions programs and studies, it's created something that actually lives on by itself. I'm told there's over 800 Native graduates at Dartmouth now. There's 180 kids on campus, and this is going to go on. I think it's now an established fact, which is not, while we were here, that this would not just end next year or next semester. It didn't work. We'll just not going to happen anymore. So it's just going to keep on going. Result of that is that now you have generationally, you now have, exponentially off of that 800, a number of people who have been born to parents and grandparents who find it completely normal that you go to, one of the best schools in the country and get yourself an education, that you belong there, We did it. God, all your kids always think you're dumber than dirt anyway, so if you can do it, we can do it. And so, off they go, whether they choose to or not. So there was an allusion in the opening to one of the much younger graduates now being the tribal chairman at Colville. Okay, so I'm the general counsel for the federal corporation at Colville. This is the tribe doing business as a corporation. Our tribal chairman is John Cyrus, class of 90-something. I got shirts older than 91, okay? Our director of gaming is Randy Williams. Randy is 75 or 76. He used to be our director of bingo, was Tom DeHaas. Tom could be at this table with us. He was a 74. And you just keep seeing that. Allison Boyd, she was one of the very early co-eds here, maybe 75 or 79. Okay, Allison is a doctor.
78.
70. No, come on. Her sister was my assistant at the office of the reservation attorney. I didn't even know it. It was just sort of, Allison walked in the door to visit her sister. I go, Christ, see, there's just more and more. So just take that just one place just as an example, because I can anecdotally just point to it. You have all these people that are, doing these, key leadership roles, and they all came out of Dartmouth. So that means something. I don't know what it means, but it means something. At the very least, it means that the concerns, that we were having, that Mike was just voicing, have proved to be, well, not, I think we did the right thing. You can go, and if you want to go back home, you go back home. Even if you don't go back home, if your kids go back home. But whatever, you've now created something that didn't exist before, something that was, that there's an expectation that some 18-year-old can go and actually do something like this, which I'm telling you was not the case in 1969 or 1970. I can attest to that. Somebody.
One of the things that I always run into in what I do now amongst my people is that some time ago I gave up the idea of trying to compare my material gains and losses against my people's material gains and losses. Because what they consider their strengths, what they do to be strong and to express who they are, doesn't depend on the material. A lot of the things that I do in ritual or ceremonies amongst people, and I get asked by a lot of different tribes to come and do these things with them, is when they get together and pull families together and they put feasts together. It's amazing what they gather together very quickly. That's their strength. Materially, it doesn't look like Wall Street, or it doesn't look like these, homes I see around here anyway. But what they do together as a people, often to take care of their own, is an expression of their strength. And I gave up trying to compare what I was doing in gains and losses to their gains and losses, because I experienced a lot of our Native people's strengths in who they are and what they do to hold together. And materially, visually, sometimes it doesn't look so good, but the people are happy. They're joyful, helping each other. And for myself, I gained such a strength just experiencing a lot. And difference now, between now and way back then also is there's a lot more openness with many different tribes toward the outside than there was when I was growing up. Now some of the other tribes, there's more closure. So to me, that falls in with natural law. I'm a Taoist, right? Things are expanding forever intimately, or infinitely. I said intimately, I didn't mean that. Are expanding forever infinitely, and things are contracting forever infinitely. So many Indian tribes are pulling in, many Indian tribes are spreading out. It all fits. These are times for the world to gain mutuality so we can share what this world has to offer, that we look at as a living entity. And so a lot of our lessons in seeing each other in terms of the values we hold, we have to be careful. But at the same time, we have to learn the things that also bring people together, that makes them more than survive. They actually learn to get along. And I see so much more of that with a lot of neighbor groups than before. It might be because of these programs, who knows?
Did you have a question?
Nobody who's 18 or 19 years old thinks of themselves as a child. But as we get older, we realize, yeah, you're still a kid. So you're a kid and you're pretty impressionable. So if you could tell me about what you have to unlearn. Let's talk about the contamination. You talked about your life was ruined by Dartmouth. So there's good things that Dartmouth had to teach, but what did you have to unlearn? And would you think about 18 and 19-year-old kids coming in here now, that you would forget the classroom? I'm not talking about the academics, I'm talking about the social and sort of philosophical environment here. What could happen here that would help them so that they don't have to spend years shedding? Because I'm pretty sure you had years you had to shed some stuff that you picked up here.
And you also gain things that are helpful. That's what I mean.
What are the things that you could do differently to help the kids so that they don't have to deal with that?
Well, one of the first things I would have to say is that we have to get the religions to stop fighting each other. Because if you're from a Native community and you had a certain traditional upbringing, you either learn to make that work or you have to shed it because you're going to be converted to something else. If you're here going back, you have to unlearn these things if you're going to even communicate with your own. And I learned that it's not so easy. I went to prep school, 4 years prep school. I was here for 4 years, ended up at Harvard for a year and a half. Then I moved back to the reservation, Rosebud. And one thing about being educated at Dartmouth is that even if you don't have the paper, they think you're smart. So they put you into these positions. I was a tribal education director. I rebuilt the tribal education department for the tribe. And you're always pulling arrows out of your back. Because the very people who say, go off and get an education so you can come back and help, that doesn't happen. You're a bird that fell out of the nest. And the thing that gets you back in is if you grew up traditionally and you start expressing that more than they do, they start looking up to you. It's funny how that works. So then what you have to do is live an example that others can emulate. And if you truly value your traditional ways, it's not about religion, it's not about better than or worse than. We were taught basic ideas on how to get along with people. And the more you do that, the more it impacts your whole environment. And if your environment begins to have this quality of what I call virtue, everybody gets affected by it. And then people start working together. And that basically means you have to unlearn some things that you learned religiously and also traditionally. You have to, I believe, build a virtue that allows you to cooperate with yourself and the world. And so everything that you learn, you can unlearn because there are many things coming to you from the outside. But the very things you know that you intuit about life is worth living. And a lot of the traditional viewpoints say that. Be yourself. Learn to get along with other people by helping them. Don't bother spying and judging other people, and walk your talk. In other words, at the Sundances I run, I say, dance your prayers. Make them real. All of us have a certain expression that we try to live by. If we do that, then if it's good, somebody else will follow. If it's not so good, you have conflict. But I think this world right now is in deep trouble because all we're doing is fighting about money and religion. And they're not worth fighting about. Now, on the other hand, if we look at what brings life back together, these things are taught within these traditions. Let's make them real. And you can't do that fighting for them. You can do them if you live by them. And to me, my life is about expressing that in the simplest and most basic way I can, because it's mine to do. But that's true of every one of you here, whether you're Native or not. So, how do you be yourself? How do you learn to get along with the world? How do you learn to do that without giving yourself up? So to me, you have to be fully yourself in order to share, also to learn about other people, and just keep it simple. In Lakota, we say we do these things to live. So why not do it? Anything you learn, you can unlearn. Anything you want to learn, you watch somebody else. And I've learned from the elders just to keep it that simple. So education isn't all it's cracked up to be, by the way.
Did that answer your question?
I told you.
I mean, you saw that, well, I don't know if you have anything to add to it.
Well, yeah, I think that what resonates to me in the comments that we've been throwing out here so far and what Howard was just saying is if you think about when we were talking about the early days, this is what you've got to do to basically to keep us here. This is to do the right thing. You've got to give us this, give us that, give us this other thing. Well, it's not really, that was the language that was used because only the institution could provide those things. It wasn't like, we deserve something special and you have to give it to us. The conclusion that I've come to over the years is that what's good for Indian people, what's good for Indian students, i.e. people, is good for everybody. And it's not about giving certain privileges or certain things to individuals. We need to have a place to call our own. Well, that's because everybody else who is here, the larger groups at any rate, have a place to call their own. This whole place is their own. And by providing the opportunity for people to operate in that same level of comfort, means that they will interact more with everybody else and means that everybody will get to know everybody else. And I'm thinking that's one of the things that, as Howard was saying, you have to know yourself, you have to be comfortable with yourself in order to be able to get to know someone else and to be able to at least to cooperate with someone else, not just to coexist. And I think that that's what communities are all about. And I think the things that I would change would be here to facilitate that would be to create more opportunities for people to feel like they're in the same community, even though they might leave here and go to a different community or come from a different community to here. When you're here, you are indeed in a community. We talk about that a lot here, but I don't think we actually practice it as much as we used to, or as much as it would take for everybody to feel, or almost everybody. I mean, I suppose you can't really do everything for everybody, but most of the people, I think, in order to feel really comfortable here, everybody has to interact. And I think that's the piece for me that's missing. And I think that we could create that kind of situation. It's much more, I guess I would say, multicultural in that, okay, everybody is participating much more so than it was when we were in school here. But it could be so much more that the opportunities to learn about each other, I think, are the key to not having to have so many things that you've got to unlearn. If you're coming from a foreign culture and you've got to fit in, there's certain things you've got to do in order not to be ostracized, I guess, or not to get in trouble or something like that. And then when you go home, you have to change those behaviors. You have to be, that's the kind of stuff you have to unlearn. But if people know each other better, there's less of that, I think. Less that you have to unlearn. Less that you have to learn to do to be over here, and less that you have to unlearn to be back over here. So that would be the thing I think that I would like to try to change. And some ways I think, and some people might call it social engineering, but I think there's some things that we as an institution, Dartmouth, is uniquely positioned to do because we are a relatively small place, relatively speaking. And we can tell people what to do. It's within our power. It might not be particularly, might not be within our instincts to do that, but it is something that we can do. And I know that there used to be certain traditions and rituals and things that went on here that no longer exist, and many of them really needed not to exist anymore. It was really imperative that they change, but we didn't replace them with something that everybody did and everybody had a common experience with. We didn't replace them with something that was more universal and created that sense of community. So now I think we have a situation where we have lots more different people here, but not as many opportunities for them to really get to know each other in a manner that would prevent having to unlearn so much. It's a hard thing to articulate, but it's a feeling, I think, that people have of belonging or not belonging in a place, and what creates that. And I think a lot of it is common experiences. So if we can create common experiences that are positive for everybody, then that goes a long way into not having to learn different things and then unlearn them.
When I left the reservation, sorry.
6 o'clock? We can still go? I mean, are we leaving?
You can get the last word, because I'm going to fix.
When was the last word?
You don't?
I just wanted to make a comment. When I left the reservation for the first time to go to prep school, my grandmother, with me getting on the bus in Valentine, Nebraska, headed east, she said, "I hate to see you go, But there's one thing I want you to remember. You'll never have blue eyes. I said, oh. Well, I had tried it at red eyes a few times, but the idea is be who you are. Don't give up who you are.
One last comment. What was the question? Any comment at all?
Parting words.
I guess, for the students, for the Native students, I think it's a great opportunity, and take advantage of it. Really utilize everything that's here. And like myself, as little time as I spent on campus, that was the best part of this whole experience. And you can get out and you can go work with tribes, you can work with Indian organizations, or you can just go work with other groups. But take advantage of what's here, what's offered, and get creative. If you have some idea of what you want to do or where you want to go, then it can happen. Oh,
That's a good last word.
Let me bring our session to a close by building on a theme that I think was running through a lot of these remarks, and the theme of relationships. And there are a number of people in the audience who played key roles in those relationships in terms of supporting. You heard some of the names: Michael Doris, Gregory Prince, Jerry Danielle. We're very, very privileged to have President Jim Wright with us tonight, one of the key players, as several of the speakers noted, who chaired the committee that helped look at establishing Native American studies, and we'll hear more from Jim later on this evening. And Molly Shai, who I was very glad to see join us tonight. Molly and Ed Shai have been longtime supporters of Native American studies at the college, and this is a big part of how we could take the seeds that were planted by these activists, these maladjusted people, to borrow Dr. King's wonderful phrase, to bring about a change in this place, which I think has been all to the good. When we talk about a universe of over 800, we need to do the homework to figure out exactly what is our number of alumni. But we know it's over 800. It's probably over 900, actually. 180 plus on a regular basis. We could run through all the stats to say, we now have 8 faculty members in Native American Studies. When Mike Doris was here, it was 0.5. There were 3 courses in Native American Studies. Now we regularly offer over 22, 23 courses per year. Over 600 students take Native American Studies courses every year. It's one of the very active. We're not as big as government or history or English. I don't think we ever want to be that big. It's not all about volume, but really it's about the kind of experience that we can offer our students to ponder and to really think seriously about some of the issues that these folks have talked about, which is bringing Indian country here, not to become Indian, but to learn more about Native peoples, Native experiences, so that when those contributions are made out in the larger community, they're informed, they're meaningful, they're impactful, and they're enduring. And I think that's a major part of the legacy that we have, to thank all of you and Jim and Molly and Michael for having started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to our alumni for being here.